This is high-stakes poker.
No, you're right. You're right.
You would have called him
High-stakes poker with 6 players.
If you know what everybody knows.
I wonder who's going broke next.
Could beat him in the pot. Call.
Phil Ivey has over $1 million now.
You know what you want to hear?
Phil Ivey could actually...
So in this hand, Phil raises middle position with ace-9 offsuit, and I don't necessarily think that's a very good raise for him in that situation, considering he has Durr in the blinds and then Ivey 2 to his left. He definitely, I mean, obviously he has to assume Ellie's going to call super wide, so I mean, when he raises in this spot, especially with like Negrani right after Ivey, he's got to figure that this pot's going to be going multi-way super often, and ace-9 offsuit just plays really badly in this situation. So I think that Phil definitely should have just folded his ace-9. In any case, he did raise to 3,900, which I'm assuming the blinds are 500, 1K here. I'm not absolutely sure on that. They could be 400, 800. In either case, the raise is... for an online game, it's definitely too large, but for live games, I know raise sizes tend to just be larger in general, and people can get away with it just because there's less 3-betting live, and there's less, like, I mean, the reason there's less 3-betting live is because there's fewer instances to create the types of dynamics that you can get away with by 3-betting frequently online, because when hands are occurring very quickly, you can sort of fold and move on to the next one. But if everybody's like, if all the hands live just go like raise, 3-bet, fold, or raise, 3-bet, 4-bet, fold, like, it gets really boring. Nobody wants to play. So that's part of the reason I think that happens. And then also live you just have players who are really bad, who are going to make like really weak calls with or poor calls with weak holdings for a bunch of big blinds, which ends up being very exploitable. So anyways, Ivey overcalls on a button, which is very standard with ace-6 suited, and it's definitely a good call in that spot. Certainly could have squeezed, but this is a hand that plays a bit better multi-way, given that you can flop the nut flush draw or whatever. So I like a call there. Negrani then calls with Jack-3 suited in the small blind, which is disastrous. Well, I mean, he does have what, four? Okay, he has 400 invested, so they're playing 400, 800. It's still just like, it's not a good call because he's going to be first to act pre-flop every street, and his hand just doesn't flop well. He never doesn't flop the nuts almost ever unless he flops like quads or whatever, or like a top four with Jack X3 or something like that, which is just, it's going to happen too infrequently, so that's obviously a bad call. Then it comes to Dwan in the big blind, and he has 9-8 suited, which is a hand that personally I would almost always just call with here, because it's another hand like the one Ivey's holding where it plays very well multi-way, and it's not a hand that I'm necessarily trying to get heads up, though obviously I don't mind if it does get heads up, since this is a hand I frequently 3-bet from the blinds. But I just get, like, the price he's getting here, I mean, I'm not going to add it all up, but it's pretty good to see a 5-way flop with 9-8 suited. In any case, there's a play that I've seen him make quite frequently, where he'll take these medium suited connector type hands and make like very large squeezes with, which is what he does here. He makes it 28-6 or something like 28-9. I can't really read, but yeah. So he's probably assuming that like Locke is going to fold everything but like the top 4 or 5% of hands, just because Phil is like so obviously afraid of Durr. And then Ellie, you might have to worry about Ellie because Ellie does not like to fold too much, but I don't know how large Ellie's stack is and whatnot, so I mean, can't really be sure about that. Obviously, he's hoping to just take it down here, but if he has to see a flop, I think that that's going to be okay, just because he's just obviously so good post flop. But anyways, that's my analysis of the spot so far. Okay, so after Dwan raises, everyone folds over to Ivey, who calls on the button with ace-6 suited, which is definitely fine considering how wide he's got to assume Dwan's going to be squeezing here, and how deep they are. So if they're playing 400, 800, I believe they're 800k deep, that means they're sitting 1,000 big blinds deep, which is totally ridiculous. And I guess that's part of the reason that they're able to play such a large pot here, given how large Dwan's original squeeze was. So the flop comes king of diamonds, queen of clubs, 10 of diamonds, and Tom bets out 45,000 into a I think what's about a $60,000 pot or so, or $65,000 pot, and he's trying to set up. Like when he makes this bet here, he's definitely setting up a situation where he's planning on firing all three. I suppose he can make this one bet, but and then choose to give up on the turn. But there's never a situation here where he can make this bet, and then like if he bets the turn, he has to bet every river, unless like the obvious really bad ones, like an ace, a jack, or a 9, or a king, or something like that. One of the advantages for Tom betting with this hand in this spot is that it's really difficult for him to have nothing on this board, because like if you think about it, if you're squeezing with queen jack or king jack or 10 jack, those hands are most often going to check this flop. Even a hand like ace king or even aces should not feel very comfortable betting out on this flop, since it's like, well, what did Ivey call with pre-flop that can call this flop that's worse? There's a few hands, but like if he gets raised, if he has like aces and he bets and gets raised here, it's pretty much an instant fold, because what hands could Phil actually have that would be bluffing here? Like maybe 8, 9 of diamonds, I guess, or 7, 8 of diamonds, but those are only like 2 combinations. Hands like ace king and aces from Phil's perspective are never gonna raise, and he can't even have those anyways because he would have 3-bet with those. So yeah, it's a really tough spot for Tom to not have anything, and all of his range that does bet for value is going to appear very strong here. So looking at it from Phil's perspective now, sitting there with the ace and the 6 of diamonds, this is a monster flop for him. He should be comfortable pretty much doing anything here. Call it, like, as long as it doesn't fold, obviously. Calling is, in my opinion, the best play. Obviously, against Tom's hand, it's the best play. And I think it's the best play against his range as well. Though, I mean, if he were to raise here, I would definitely wouldn't fault him. It's just that calling is more plus EV than raising, since Tom can potentially represent cards that improve Phil, like if it comes like a low diamond, and then obviously if a jack comes, Tom's probably going to shut down, but Phil will always win the pot in that instance. And then also it kind of sucks, like since they're 1,000 big blinds deep, if Phil were to raise and then Tom were to like 3-bet, it puts Phil in kind of an awkward spot where he doesn't want to get in 1,000 big blinds with just the nut flush draw and a gutter, because I mean, he's going to be up against ace jack, or yeah, I don't think they're going to get in with anything worse than ace jack there for 1,000 big blinds. So definitely think Phil's play here is to call.
Three of spades on the turn. About as blank as you can get. 162,000 in the pot already.
So the turn comes with 3 of spades, which is complete brick, and Tom bets out again 123,000 into 285. I don't exactly understand the idea of this bet. I mean, I realize that like if Tom was trying to get all the money in by the river, he would be betting slightly larger here, probably around 160 to 180,000, but because I've seen this hand quite a few times, I know that on the river Tom ends up bidding almost his whole stack, but leaves behind like 250,000 or something. So it may be a way of pot controlling his bluffs. He may know something about the way Phil thinks about the game and maybe trying to level him that way. I can't really be sure about that because obviously I am not Tom Dwan. But it's definitely a bet that puts Phil in a very difficult spot with almost his entire range. Obviously, now when Phil's holding ace-6 of diamonds, it's nothing but a clear call. Like, it wouldn't really make much sense to raise at this point unless he's like because any raise is going to commit him to jamming the river, or if Tom has a strong enough hand, which like the hands that Tom is representing here are tens, queens, kings, king, queen, and ace, jack, and jack nine. He might, I don't know, he's probably betting king, queen here, but that would be like the bottom of his range, I assume. Potentially queen 10, but that's starting to get kind of iffy as to like what is Phil going to call with that's worse than queen 10 here. Like, would he call king jack? I really don't think so. I don't really even think Phil would have. I guess, like, yeah, he could get here with king jack, but I mean, he has to know that Tom is never betting this turn without betting the river at this point. So, like, I mean, if I was in Phil's spot and had king jack, I definitely would have folded at this point. But I also probably would have folded pre, just because I don't want to be in this spot against Tom, since I know he can do stuff like this with 9-8 suited. But like I said, on the flop, it's like, what hands could Tom even be bluffing with? And when Phil has the ace of diamonds, it's like, well, now he knows Tom doesn't have the nut flush draw, so he's either bluffing with like jack 10 or pocket jacks or queen jack, or he's got like one of those made hands I was talking about, or he has specifically 8-9 or 7-8 of diamonds are the only hands that really make sense. He can't have 6-7 diamonds because Phil has a 6 diamonds in his hand. So that's part of the reason that makes this bluff such a good one from Tom, is because because Ivey blocks all of Tom's potential bluffing outs. I mean, Tom doesn't know that, but it doesn't change the fact that it's so rare that he can be bluffing in this situation. In any case, Phil just has a pretty automatic call at this point.
If he hits his hand, and 2, there's a small chance that Dwan is completely airballing. Ivey makes a pair of 6s on the river. Misses the flush, misses the straight. There's $408,700 out there. It's not like Tom Dwan to give up. This is the first time all season that the table's been completely quiet. Even Phil Lock and Antonio are quiet. He is loading the gun. He fires.
Okay, so the river comes to 6 of clubs, and Tom bets out 270K, leaving himself, I think, roughly 280K behind. And he did that into a 400K pot. Tom has to bet here. It's a fairly standard bet, since pretty much everything that bets the turn has to bet this river, since Phil will be calling the turn with all sorts of hands like diamond draws, potentially king jack, queen jack, even queen 10 type hands. I think mostly he's expecting to call turn and fold river. I'm not sure which of those he thinks Phil will fold on the turn, but there's no way that he can set this up the way that he did and not follow through on this river. It would be a massive mistake not to. The reason I think he makes this bet of 268 and not just outright jamming is because I believe his value range is so strong that that Phil has to know that Tom is always calling with all of his value hands if Phil were to jam. So and Tom's bluff range is so narrow here that it doesn't really make much sense for him to just jam it all in, since he can save himself some money the times Phil's slow playing or trapping with a monster hand. Tom got sort of lucky that that Phil actually was holding ace of diamonds in his hand here, just because it forces Phil into the situation where he's like, he has the only card that, like, the most important card that Tom could potentially be bluffing with in his hand. So, like I said about Tom's bluff range being so narrow here, it's really only like 7-8 of diamonds, 8-9 of diamonds, and then also like 8-9 of spades or clubs or whatever. And then potentially other hands he could be bluffing with here would be like, I guess like Jack 10 or Queen Jack or Pocket Jacks, but even those beat Phil with his pair of sixes. So really, like, Phil just can't even consider calling here, and it would be a pretty bad call if he did make it. So yeah, I think it was played pretty well from both of them. The only thing I wouldn't have done is I wouldn't have squeezed like Tom did pre. And I probably wouldn't have the stones to fire 800 big blinds from out of position, 3 barrels into Phil Ivey. So gotta give Tom some credit for that.
Can't be nothing except what Tom Dwan has.
Okay.
Oh, that one hurt.
God,
I think he's
my eyes
bluffing.
hurt so.
Give him 5,000 if you can't show your ace high or better. Give him a free roll for 1,000 on ace high or better if he can't.
I really think he's
The light's just like,
What's wrong with your eyes?
because I was staring at the same card the whole time, and something about the lights must really.
Yeah, man. Let's go.
Durr, you're a very interesting human. I'm glad to be in your orbit, you know? 'Cause I know we don't connect a lot, but it's nice to be around,
Like, I must have just been at a weird light angle.
Well, maybe there is something wrong with his eyes. Maybe he didn't see what he had.
You were wrong.
But there's nothing wrong with his heart. One of the most outstanding plays in the history of high-stakes poker.